It's Tuesday, February the 16th, which time would normally be my live radio show, but during the transition period that Awake Radio is making, just going to do a podcast, and then Awake Radio will play it when at a specified time. And so I'm interviewing again for the second time with Sherry Peel Jackson, who I know from America Freedom to Fascism documentary, who is you're a former IRS agent, a retired certified public accountant, and a certified fraud examiner. And you were working for the IRS. I'm just, correct any errors that I might make here, but so you were working for the IRS, and somebody came up with trying to find the law that said that people had to pay income tax, and it was like some kind of a contest for $50,000 if you can find that law, and you looked into it, and that's kind of what got you into this, and you could not find the law that said that people had to pay an income tax.
That's true, but the only difference is by the time that USA Today ad came out in July of 2000, I was no longer working for the IRS. I actually quit the IRS in 1995. So a few years went by before I started doing the research. And I think that people were afraid to come to me and express what they had learned or what they were hearing while I was still working there. But as I left, I started hearing more and more people coming forth saying that they were hearing that the income tax was being misrepresented and misapplied to the American people. Now, when I was hearing this, I just kind of put it in the back of my head. It wasn't something that I just totally dismissed, because I always do research on something before I make a comment on it. So as I started hearing it more and more, 2000 came along, and I don't know, that was the boom year for people finding out about the fraud. So I had a representative from Texas tell me when I was out there, and I believe I was in Dallas, and then others were telling me. What happened was, when I was at the IRS, for the last 2.5 years that I was there, I audited ministers because they felt like a lot of ministers weren't paying, and they were taking money, straight out of the offering or whatever. But when I got out, I was determined to help these ministers stay away, help them stay clear of the IRS. So one of the ministers that was my client at the time, called me and said, one of my parishioners has got all this information about the income tax not applying to us, and I really want you to talk to her. Well, yeah, I'm going to talk to her on behalf of this pastor. So I talked to the woman. She was very intelligent. She didn't sound like some kind of a nut from the hills or anything like that. And she told me, she really water hosed me down just with a lot of information, but I was able to take it. So I thought about it. I said, wow, she had a lot of information. So this woman 2 weeks later called me and said, Miss Jackson, the information that I told you a couple of weeks ago, it's in the USA Today. There's an ad in the USA Today. So I went all the way into downtown Stone Mountain, Georgia, found a German bakery that had one of those newspaper stands, because they're just not around a lot here. So I found the USA Today ad, and I read it, and it said it was from We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education, that was run at the time by Bob Schultz, and it had a lot of clear information in it. And there was Joe Bannister's information and the books that he had written, and then there was a guy named William Conklin. Conklin was the one who had the $50,000 reward,
right?
And a few other things played into that. Someone at church had given me a book by Irwin Schiff.
Right.
And it was a little yellow book called How Not to Pay Income Taxes or something. And all this stuff happened around the same time. So I decided that to go ahead and do research. And it didn't take long before I realized that there was a rat in the camp. So that's what happened. So I got on that trail, basically, of research in the summer of 2000. And got hooked up with Joe Bannister and John Turner and Bob Schultz, and some others, and started having meetings and discussing this. And got to the point where Bob Schultz had went to Washington and tied himself to or chained himself to something until he got some meetings. So this thing was not just about me. It was a movement, and there were a lot of people involved in it, but not enough.
Yeah. And so right, so that this was the that whole $50,000, if you could find the law that says that you have to pay income tax, and you were not able to find it.
No, I was. This is something that's very interesting, Kat. If you go into Title 27, which I think they call it maybe excise taxes or whatever, there are several laws within Title 27, and they're very clear. Who owes the tax? What is the tax? When is it due? All these things are spelled out crystal clear. But when you go over to Title 26, they talk about who must file and all that, but it doesn't clearly say it. And people say Regulation 1.1 says married people who makes no, because that's not all married people. Married people in China don't have to pay. It's not clear. And when you start talking about that was a little red flag for me. Another little red flag is the definition of income is nowhere in the code. When you finally find a definition of income, it's in the Supreme Court. And I don't remember what case it is right now, but the Supreme Court, which is the law of our land, defined income as corporate profits. Now, that was a really red flag for me, because as you look at it today, let's take a corporation like Walmart. Everybody knows who Walmart is, just about everybody. So, and I'm going to use some very, very low numbers, knowing that Walmart makes a lot more money than this. But let's say, for the sake of argument, Walmart's gross was $1 million. So during the year, they made $1 million. But they had rent, and they had to pay the employees, and they had utilities and all that. And their expenses were $800,000. Well, Walmart then would report a profit of $200,000 and pay tax on that. Now, let's say you and I made an agreement where I was going to cut your grass for $100 a week. You give me $100, and in exchange, I have $100, but I have expenses to go against that. Not only my brain for making sure that I cut your grass correctly and with the right blade, but my arms and legs, my time, my talents, all go into that. Those are expenses, and they won't let us deduct our own expenses. Let's say, for the sake of argument, put it like this. That contract between the two of us is an even exchange.
Right.
And so we're being robbed.
It's extraction.
It's extraction. So a person that doesn't have a home-based business, somebody that works at AT&T or somebody that works at Walmart, and they make, let's say, $30,000 a year, all the time that was stolen from them, having to deal with crazy customers in Walmart and managers and all that, they have to pay tax on the $30,000. They don't get to deduct the expenses. So even if you don't do the research, and even if you are not sure within your mind that this income tax is a fraud, it's still morally wrong.
Right. Right, because exactly, I mean, income, you deserve that. I mean, it literally is like extracting blood from people. I mean, profit, that's a different story, but income is not profit. Income is equal. It should be equal and opposite exchange. And if that's being taxed, then it's like, a worker is literally being bled to death over time.
Right. That's why I keep saying that we're all slaves, because, how can you get back your time? That person that's stuck and
your health.
Right. Especially, that person, and I'm going to go back to, Walmart again. That person that's working 50 hours a week at Walmart just to make the bills, not even to have extra, but just to make the bills. And they do that for 10, 20, 30 years. That's a slave. There's no difference between that and slavery to me, because the $30,000 that they have produced, they don't have any deductions for it. They're being taxed, and they're not getting credit for their brain or their labor. So with that said, I made a decision to start exposing what I thought was a fraud, and not just me, but again, there are lots of people that were involved. And you mentioned America to Fascism.
Yeah.
I am so glad that the late great Aaron Russo decided to do that documentary, because that was a collage of different people. You had us former IRS agents, me, Joe, and John, and a couple of other ones. You had a former FBI agent in the movie. You had Ron Paul, which just recently retired from Congress. You had several constitutional attorneys. You had historians like Ed Griffin. All these different people saying the same thing, and people are even now just discovering that movie. Especially during tax season, you don't know how many. I get at least 200 emails a day, Kat, because some people are just finding out about this.
That movie is how old already? It's
2006, so it's going on 10 years this year.
I think I saw that movie. It had to be around 2010, I would think. Something somewhere around there. I know it was after Aaron Russo died. I wish I could have gotten to meet him, but so I just wanted to point out in that movie and bring up Marcy Brooks, one of the jurors in the case that Aaron Russo illustrates of the IRS taking to court. I think it was a Mr. Harrell.
Whitey Harrell.
Yeah, Whitey Harrell. Right, and Whitey, he stood up for himself. He knew his rights, and Marcy Brooks, makes the point of Whitey Harrell not paying his taxes and yet at the same time still being innocent, which was something that they were not expecting.
That's a classic part of that movie. The way she described how the jurors were back there and saying, "But he's going to get away with it."
Right.
And then somebody says, "But if it's not a law, he's not getting away with anything." Well, not only did they go back after Whitey after that, but they went after Marcia Brooks. And I don't know her status right now, but the fact that they go after people that are vocal kind of lets you know that we're in a tyrannical situation. Most of the people in the country are not going to do anything about it. We have become a nation of fearful people.
I just wanted to make the point, and I'm glad you said that, because what you say about the IRS in the video on your How to Stick It to the IRS Confessions of a Former Insider. People see that this is the kind of stuff that I have been trying to talk about since the 70s and into the 80s and the 90s about owning your power and trying to get people to own their power, because see, the thing, the point that I want to make about Marcy Brooks, because it applies to the justice system too. Like, how many jurors would have given their power away to the judge? And when the judge said to Marcy Brooks and the other jurors, "You have everything you need," when they asked the judge, for the law that said that people had to pay an income tax, and it wasn't among the paperwork that they had. And she said, "Well, we don't, and the judge was like, 'You have everything you need. The law is as I give it to you.'" I mean, right. like a parent would say to a child, like, "Oh, because I said so," kind of thing, And so, I have to applaud Marcy Brooks and those other jurors, because any other juror would have bowed to that judge, just like people bow to the IRS. And so then that's what I'm saying. So then, where do you get any justice? Where do you get, even in the courts, if all people do is bow?
Right. That's what happened in my case. Actually, the judge kept shutting me down when I was trying to explain what I had learned concerning the law. She kept saying, "I will instruct the jury as to the law." And I couldn't tell them. And of course, she wasn't going to tell them what I told them. I mean, what I was going to tell them. So that the justice may not be there until people have had enough. But in the meantime, the 99% of the people who are too afraid to stand up and buck the
Yeah.
IRS, there are still ways for them to keep more of what they earn. And that is why I wrote these two books, because I realized that there's less than 1% of the people out there going to fight for their rights in the way that I did and the way that Joe did and Whitey Harold and those. The books that I wrote, which are Escape the Rat Race, 4 Keys to Acquire the Life of Your Dreams, and the title is really self-explanatory, but unless people go out and stop depending on corporations and government, then they're always going to be slaves. People have to go and start their own businesses, and I prefer home-based businesses so you won't have the overhead of having to rent a building. But if people start their own businesses, whether that be products or services, then they're going to be in a better position like the corporations. They'll be able to deduct the expenses, same type of expenses that the corporations get to deduct. So, for instance, Kat, I have a home-based business. If you don't have a home-based business, you can't write off part of your cell phone. You can't write off part of your internet service. You can't write off your mileage. And so many other expenses that are out there that you would normally be paying anyway. If you don't have a home-based business, you can't write those off. So that is where escape the rat race, 4 keys, how to escape the rat race, 4 keys to acquire the life of your dreams goes. Now, the second book, How to Stick It to the IRS, Confessions from a Former Insider, are just confessions from a former insider. I talk about how the IRS operates from the inside. I talk about the audits and how a lot of people get tricked into saying and doing things that will really hurt them. I mentioned lots and lots of my cases in there, and recently tax attorney Mac McPherson agreed to and has written a chapter in my book, and he's a criminal tax attorney. So he has a chapter in the book where he explains the different things that have been done to people concerning criminal tax trials, and he talks about remedies as far as when the IRS says you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. So with those two books out there, I'm hoping to help at least reduce the amount of money that people are giving over to the insidious representatives of Satan.
I'm kind of glad that you call it that. Yeah, because
that's what it is.
Yep, because you talk about right, like people being afraid and giving in to the IRS, handing over everything, even their rights. People lose businesses, they become victims. They have physical breakdowns and even suicide.
That's right. When I was locked up in prison for standing up for my rights, I heard on the radio where a man, either it was a small plane or helicopter that he flew, and nobody died but him. But he had just gotten to the point where he just couldn't take it anymore, and he did a suicide run. And I don't know whether he thought he was going to kill some people or not, but it's really sad. And that's not the first time I've heard of a suicide.
That guy? Well, okay, right, okay. Because I had two situations, right? The guy that, right, he did kill himself by flying the plane into the IRS building. But then the other guy, the postman, who flew that little small plane with letters to the IRS. Wasn't it the IRS? Or is that a different?
Yeah, no, I didn't hear about that one at all. I don't have TV, and I have limited amounts of information. But again, there are so many examples of people who get so frustrated because they're working all their lives and they're not getting anywhere. Can you imagine? Making $50,000 or $60,000, and then at the end of the year, when you've tried to keep most of your money, they say you owe $5,000. You don't have the $5,000 because you've been taking care of your children. Just regular stuff, not going on lavish vacations, just taking care of your family. And then you have nothing.
And then to top that all off, if people don't even enjoy what they do, which if you have to spend a lot of your hours at a job that you don't even necessarily like.
I don't know where you are, but here in Stone Mountain, and I've been talking to some of my friends about this, I have seen since maybe November a shift in the attitude of people that work with the public, a negative shift. It's if they hate their jobs, and they're going to take it out on you. Cashiers and
Right.
people that serve you on the phone, and, no smile.
Right.
They mess up and then they lie. I had a whole situation where the cashier actually lied on me. His manager saw right through the lie, but it's interesting how people feel trapped. That's what it is, Kat. People feel trapped because they feel like they're in a dead end situation. And what I am trying to do is I am trying to shed some light on their situation, why they're there, and give them some hope.
It's like a domestic violence situation, except it's with their job or the IRS.
Yeah, it's battery.
And I wanted, you just reminded me of the, because what you described is basically like everything is literally just about the bottom line. And I just wanted to kind of bring up, because I'm blogging about the debtor's prison that they created in Ferguson. It's like recently the city of Ferguson is being sued by the Justice Department because of their abusive police practices. They created a complete debtor's prison with the vulnerable, poor, black and brown people in Ferguson, making up like fake crimes, giving people just bogus tickets, and then they would be accruing all these fines, putting them in jail for not being able to pay these fines, and then and like you said with the IRS, people were having breakdowns and committing suicide, and so what happened was, or what this is kind of like going on. It's current. The Justice Department was telling the city of Ferguson to retrain and change their police practices, and the city of Ferguson basically told the Justice Department that they can't afford to. They're so financially dependent on violating and abusing people's rights that financially they can't afford to change their police practices, so the Department of Justice is suing them. I mean, like, can you believe this? But so what I don't understand, because like nobody looks at the real cost and the real affordability. Just like in Flint with that whole water disaster, is the lives. Like, so exactly, like nobody considers the real cost to be human life. Like, that's not the real cost. The real cost today is this, I just call it fake genetically modified money that banks make out of debt, out of thin air. Like that, is what has like, what people consider the real cost, instead of human life and the cost to the environment. That's not real cost anymore to people. And
well, this is
kind of scary.
This is a systemic problem on all levels, and it makes so much sense what you said, even though I hadn't heard it before about Ferguson. The reason that they're creating these debtors' prisons and these tickets for just having a broken tail light and all this stuff is because they're broke. In other words, they are broke. They have abused the funds that were entrusted to them. Now they are broke.
Right. They abuse their power.
Right. So they figured out, well, since we're broke, the only way that we know how to get more money is to squeeze it from the people. Now, Kat, that's the same thing the government is doing.
Exactly.
The broke.
And this is...
You realize that they have made it where if you owe over $50,000, they're going to take your passport. What is that but prison? You're locked in the United States. Same thing, different level.
I studied, about the abusive family system when I was growing up. Like, that's basically how I taught myself all of this stuff. And healthy relationship skills, standing up for yourself, like knowing your rights, setting boundaries. I mean, decades ago, I had no idea that it was going to really apply to the IRS or with what's his name, Eddie Craig, who teaches people how to stand up to the police and know your rights when dealing with the police. He's another person I've interviewed a couple of times, because people just, automatically just assume that, the police, the IRS, like everybody's looking out for them. and they're not, and they
Have you
take
noticed?
complete advantage of that.
That's true. Have you noticed that there's a shift there also where the older people are still being 100% compliant, but the younger people are revolting? I have noticed that the younger people are not complying.
Oh,
The
good
younger
for them.
people, and even I don't watch TV. I don't even have TV, but I heard that even this Beyonce person did a 180 on them and did something at the Super Bowl during the Super Bowl that
Yeesh.
everybody was so ticked off at. The younger people are angry. They are angry. You know, I have a
Yeah.
25-year-old and a 23-year-old. My 25-year-old is a male.
I've been angry since the 70s. I've been saying this stuff to people since the early 70s. I mean, not about the IRS, but just about abuse of power and standing up to power. And you should not just, blindly obey somebody just because they're in some position of power.
But the problem is, for every one of you, there's 100 of those that say, "Oh, I don't want to rock the boat." I had somebody walk up to me and says, "I don't care what the law says. I care what the IRS can do to me." And I think that's the sentiment around the country with those that are just afraid. But the younger people, they see that the Social Security system is not there for them. They see that they will never have a safety net. They see that they have to make it on their own, and they also see the abuses that are going on with so-called authorities. So they're not going to be compliant. They're not going to be yellow belly. And we do have a situation here that is brewing all over the country, and it is in Ferguson, and it is, the police abuses and all that, and it's in our media is so twisted that every time some white cop kills a black kid, it's on television. But do you realize they're killing white ones too? I'm getting emails from people that are saying that it's just not the black kids. They did this to my son, and they did that to my son, and they're trying to make it a racial issue. I don't know why. Some people say they want a race war, whatever, but this is not just a racial issue. I'm not saying that race isn't involved, but there are other kids, white kids and Asian kids that are also being abused and bullied and beat down.
Right.
So the kids are angry, and the kids, I believe that the kids are going to unite, and that's where some change, because the old folks don't want to do anything. They don't want to rock the boat.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be 52 in a couple of months, and I'm getting a little bit tired over the years, but I still have the same sort of fight that I've had, since the 70s, because what I knew and learned about the family system, the microcosm, literally now is just this macrocosm. It's just, it was just the smaller version. And I studied a lot about health and healing and fitness, and just I tried so hard, like teaching people about like relationship fitness. Like, I don't know what else to call it except to call it like relationship fitness, and having exchanges and just knowing how to relate, in ways that, because we've been so diverted by money that people have gotten taken so off course from, I mean, what else is there besides health? I mean, I have no idea. If health is not real wealth, and being able to make it to like an optimum level of fitness, like physically, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, most people are just only raised to just use only so much of themselves, physically and mentally, and they don't really get to a point where they're, Abraham Maslow uses the term self-actualization. Most people don't ever get to be their full self, and they don't even realize that that's by design.
That's the point. That this whole psychosis is here to make you sick, broke, misinformed, and fearful. And they're trying to steal all your money on one side, and they're trying to kill you with the pharmaceuticals and the Frankenstein foods on the other side.
Yeah.
And until people wake up and turn off that foolishness on television and start researching and understand that it's like the Matrix.
Yeah.
People don't even understand that they're being led to the slaughter. I don't care whether you're Democrat, I don't care whether you're Republican, I don't care whether you're green, black, white, blue, purple, polka dot. People are being led to the slaughter, and they are being distracted by all this politics foolishness and all of these different television shows and making people fight over whether they're black or white or Jewish or Christian or Muslim. All of that's all by design, just like you said. And when people wake up and realize that we're all being locked into a cage, and they rise above those levels, and they'll see who's really at work here. And that the money people, the banksters, the money changers.
Yeah. The thing that really, really disappoints me, like, you mentioned, the woman that said, the IRS is the one that can come and put me in jail or something like that. I mean, it's understandable, but what people, I don't know if they realize it or not, but by doing that, they're contributing to the most vulnerable people in this country and all over the world, like, are the ones going to be sacrificed. For each person that goes along with this system and doesn't stand up to it, that's just like, that's another most vulnerable person, in this country or on the other side of the world, who's going to be sacrificed because of that.
Well, they don't care. They don't care about other people. They care about themselves. They want to make sure that they have their $750,000 home and their Mercedes Benz and their other luxury car. They want to make sure that they're comfortable. They don't care about your comfort. They don't care about my comfort. But they don't realize that if they don't stand up for the rights of others, pretty soon they won't have any of that stuff anyway.
Well, see, again, so now I'm glad you made that point. I'm talking about comfort, because, I mean, this is where fitness comes in. This is where, people don't think about fitness. I mean, a certain amount of comfort, sure, but too much comfort in life. I mean, like, I always felt that fitness and just living a fit life, being lean, living a lean life, having, just as much as you need and require to live, but anything more than that, really is excess, and it's not healthy. Like, I always go back to health, because, the more comfort and cushion people have, I mean, it really isn't healthy. So, standing up and helping the underprivileged, or standing up for justice and the people that are really getting screwed or jailed or driven to, like, physical breakdowns and suicide, standing up for those people does you good, when you're fit. That's all I believe in, is just people leading fit lives, like, mentally and, physically and spiritually, and not, too much comfort is not healthy. I mean,
look at the American people. What state are they in? They are in a state of complacency and comfort. They come home from work, and I know people are tired when they come home from work, but they come home from work, they plop down on the sofa, and they turn on the television. Some of them go to sleep in front of the television. Some of them are watching it all the way through the 11 o'clock news, and then they start the same routine over. There are others that have been emailing me that say, I want out of this. I don't want this lifestyle anymore. It's not getting me anywhere. I'm just living for somebody else's dreams. Help me get out of this.
Exactly.
And we need more of those people. We need more of those people.
If people could look at their job situation or their company, wherever they work, as this relationship family type system, and it being, like, either dysfunctional or healthy, because, like, that's kind of like what I've come to look at it as. And people at work should be able to grow. You should have meaning and satisfaction and fulfillment when you go to work, and actually feel like you're contributing. I mean, it should be more than just a paycheck, or, I don't know, screwing people over for money or profit. It should be, I don't, like, I see, like, that's what I don't understand. Like, I would think that it would be more satisfying to help people, rather than to screw people over for money.
Like, that would be the exception more than the rule, because of the way people have been trained in the government schools, because of what they see on television, all these shows that show all of these crooks getting away with, stealing people's money, and not just like street robberies. I'm talking about techno robberies and things like that. This was a grand scheme that started a very long time ago, and unfortunately the enemy has been successful in making the people greedy, looking for, more than rights without responsibilities. That's what it is. They're looking for all these rights without responsibilities. You've got millions of people that don't work, yet they make sure that they vote for the candidate that is going, it looks like they're going to get the most benefits, and it's just a crazy system. So, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I tell people this, and they're appalled. I don't vote. I don't vote at all, because changing the players isn't going to do any good if you don't change the game.
Right.
It's an act of futility for me to go, especially with these voting machines, where if I press a button for this person, it might go to another person because we don't know what it is. But it's an act of futility for me to go and vote for somebody, because over the last several decades, nothing positive has changed. We're at $19 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
We still have the war on drugs. We still have the war on poverty, and all these things keep going. And neither the Democrats nor the Republicans nor anybody else has made a change. Now, don't you think that's all by design? Until the system is changed, until the game is changed, it doesn't make sense to vote for people. What we need to do, and people say, why don't you run for office? No, I can do a lot more good on the outside exposing what I know than I can sitting up there in boring meetings while they make deals about who's going to get this position and who's going to, now they're up there fighting about, since Scalia is dead, the Democrats want to assign somebody prior to the election, and the Republicans are saying, no, you need to wait till after the election. And, all of that's a crock, because we need to be concentrated on us. Just like you said, where's our food going to come from when the wheels come off? When the excrement hits the portable cooling device, which it will, how are people going to eat? They're not even concerned about that. They're just thinking about the grocery store that's about a mile away. Well, what if the trucks can't come supply that store? What are you doing to prepare yourself for the plans that they have, that Aaron Russo talked about, the plans that they have for you? What are you going to do? That's what really scares me, Kat. The thing that scares me is so many people that are uninformed, and when the wheels really come off, what are they going to do? So we have to prepare ourselves. We have to tell as many people as will listen. We have to prepare for our families, because this thing is getting ugly. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but they kicked the can down the road for so many decades, and it's coming to the dead end.
The thing that scares me the most is that if people don't wake up and realize that it's the powers that be that you have to stand up to and take your power back from, because what those people are going to do instead is turn and take it out on the average person, which is what they've been doing. Everything that the people should be turning and standing up to the people in power, they work for those people in power and then turn around and screw over the average person instead. And they know that they're doing it. I mean, most people know that they're doing it, and they I don't know, they like it, they enjoy it.
I think the issue is that they feel powerless against the so-called powers that be, and since they must take out their frustrations, they turn to somebody either at the same level or a lower level than them. They know. It's not that they don't know where their ills are coming from. It's just that they feel powerless. I talk to people all the time. They feel powerless against these people at the banksters for with the things that are going on with their bank accounts, and pretty soon something's going to go down like Greece, where Cyprus people woke up on a Monday morning. Number one, they couldn't get into their boxes at the bank, safe deposit boxes. By the way, I had a teller tell me that they went to some training, and they were told that if we have another event like 9/11, that they they were not to let anybody in their safe deposit boxes. And this was a long time ago. And of course, you know, I don't have a safe deposit box, but people aren't going to get any money. Now, in Cyprus, they were, even wealthy people that were wealthy, were only able to get 50 euros a day. Now, somebody that was thoroughly prepared they wouldn't have had themselves in that situation. First of all, they wouldn't have had that much money in the bank. Second of all, they would have been able to fly out of Cyprus that day because they had cash and gold and silver and other assets on hand. And if they weren't able to get out immediately, they would have had food enough for a couple of 3 weeks because they were prepared. Now, they laugh at these preppers. They've got some show that makes fun of preppers.
Oh, really?
It's I saw some
How
show.
How ridiculous is that?
Somewhere. Yeah, and it on the sly is laughing at these people. But I remember, I'm a sci-fi fan, and there's an episode of The Twilight Zone called The Shelter. Now, Twilight Zone was made back in the 50s and 60s. And this episode was where a doctor and his wife and son were having a birthday party for the doctor, and his neighbors from across the street were over, and they were having a great time. And they made mention while they were at the table with the cake about how the doctor had been spending so much time building this shelter and how stupid that was. And then later on, during this party, the radio came on and said that we were being attacked and everybody needed to go in their basements. And some of everybody ran home, but the neighbors ended up coming back to his house to try to get in his shelter. And he was trying to tell them, I can't let you in. There's enough food and water and supplies for me and my wife and my son. Right. And they were begging. They were doing, go look it up. They were doing some crazy stuff to get in this man's shelter. And in the end, they were able to tear the door to his shelter down.
He should have never told them that he had it.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. It's like they couldn't have. They had to know because they were his neighbors. They were all friends at first. They were friends. So once they tore the door down to the shelter, the newscast came on and said it was just a few meteors or something. And then the neighbors started, apologizing and said, okay, well, we can get back to normal. And then the doctor's looking bewildered. It's like, what is normal? At that point in my life, I had like chills and the hair rose up on the back of my head because I realized that what you're saying in a certain way is when all this stuff goes down, what are people going to do? They're going to turn against their neighbors, and especially people that they know have something.
Right.
So why not just start preparing and stop laughing at the preppers and start putting some things aside for yourself so that when the stuff does go down, you have something. And you can't do that if you're living hand to mouth, if you're living paycheck to paycheck. So again, there are things that people can do to better their lives, to better their resources, but they've got to come home, decompress maybe for an hour, get a meal, and get down to their home-based business.
So we have like about 15 minutes left. Can you talk about what people, so you said a home-based business with no overhead. And so, how do people keep more of what they earn?
First of all, one of the first sections of the book talks about decreasing expenses. We have gotten really, really crazy with our expenses. There are people out there that are asking for money from churches. I work at a church, and people call and they're asking for money to stay one more night in the motel, and because what people have done is they have spent up to their income. There's no sense in you. My mentor says that if you're not making $20,000 a week, you don't need TV. And that may be extreme to some people, but I understand the concept. There are people that are on food stamps running around with cell phones that are $600 and $700. There are people out there that have cable TV that are borrowing their rent. It's like the first thing people need to do if they're serious about escaping the rat race is decrease their expenses. There are always ways to decrease the expenses.
See, it comes down to fitness again, just trimming the fat.
Right.
Cable TV is definitely fat.
Right. So I have Netflix. It's what, $7.99 a month? And I like documentaries. I don't have cable TV. I don't even have regular TV.
Right.
When I talk to people face to face about decreasing their expenses, they get defensive.
Yeah.
Because these are things that they want. Their flesh wants to be
Right.
able to look at cable TV. Their flesh wants to be able to go to Starbucks every day. But you can't afford that if you're serious about getting yourself in financial order. Because if you're making 30,000, but you're spending 30,000, all you're doing is being a hamster on a wheel. So decreasing expenses is the fastest way to increase the income. And then after you've gotten your expenses down to the bare bones, fitness, just like you said,
Yeah.
then at the same time, you're looking for a viable home-based business. There are several different kinds of home-based businesses. In my seminars, I talk about them. I talk about what's easy to do, what's hard to do, and making sure that people understand that everything that you like to do is not necessarily a candidate for a business. It could be a hobby. It may not make any money. So there's a lot of research to go into starting home-based businesses. But those are the key to getting out of the rat race. So when people, and I know people that have done it. I know people within 3 years have turned their lives around that had tons and tons of debt. Because most people are in debt. They have credit card debt. They have a new car. They get a new car every 3 years or so. They have several credit cards. They have the department store credit cards so they can go and shop till they drop. And that right there, what I call the earn spend cycle, is killing people. So I teach people how to get out of the earn spend cycle. And then when you start your home-based business, then you want to make sure that it's in order so that you won't get audited and the IRS take everything that you've earned after you get started.
Okay, so two questions came to my mind. The first one, of course, was about the credit cards. I don't want to go off on this whole spiel about the credit cards, but credit card companies or the banks are basically profiting off of the fact that people use credit cards, and they're making money off of money that they're not even lending you.
Right, it's really illegal to lend credit, but when someone put together a couple of lawsuits to show that the banks weren't supposed to be lending credits, and they won. I think there was about 7 lawsuits that this person won, showing that the bank wasn't lending anything. They were lending credit, and that's illegal. After that, then the banksters got together with the judges and stopped the lawsuits. They would dismiss the suits before they came up. I know a couple of people that won their cases, and then 6 or 7 months later, they came back on them a second time. So it's just like you said, that the thing is perpetual because they have the big dollars and they have the guns. And until people get together and strategize, because there's a difference between a revolt and a revolution. A revolt is just a whole bunch of mad people doing things that aren't organized. But a revolution is needed here, and a revolution in our finances, and a revolution in our health. There are cures to cancer and AIDS. There are cures to cancer and AIDS. Right. I'm sure you know that. Yeah. But they don't want to talk about them here on the United States shores because it's more profitable to treat people. Yep. And I have videos of doctors showing that they're cures for cancer. Doctors. And I have these videos, and I've been sharing them with some people at my church that have been diagnosed with cancer. But again, people just fall right into that, let me go get my chemo, let me go get my radiation. It's so sad because if they turn off the television and do a little bit of internet research, they'll realize that, hey, I don't have to die from this cancer because they're cures.
Yep, juicing raw cannabis, I saw a documentary on that.
And that's why they're trying to stop it. That's why they are trying to stop it. Yeah. But again, it's gonna come. The revolution will come. Whether it be the young children, whether it be the people that are gonna. There's that movie. The guy stands up there and says, "I'm mad as H, and I'm not gonna take it anymore." Yeah. When enough people do that, we will have real change, and there will be a shift in the way the United States is operated, and no longer will we let people that are greedy and that don't have our best interests at heart have power.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but do you have an idea of how off into the future that revolution could possibly come? Like 5 years, 10 years? I hope it's soon.
It's already started.
I can't wait.
Like the young people are realizing that they don't have Social Security. They're paying into it They're taking large chunks of money out of these kids' checks, but they know they're not going to get it, so that's starting. And then the kids are realizing that the authorities are the ones that are corrupt. So I think one of the large catalysts will be when we have another situation like that happened on September 29th, 2008, when the stock market went down 777.68 points.
Yeah.
When we have another situation like that, I think that's going to be a large catalyst to the revolution starting. Not the revolt, but the revolution starting. Because when there are several economists out there, well-known economists, that are saying that this economy is going to crash and it's going to be 2008 on steroids.
I recently interviewed Nomi Prinz, who wrote All the President's Bankers. I mean, in the podcast, she said that the money that the banks get from the Fed is just fabricated.
Right, I mean, spin around and say some magic words.
I mean, if
what I was gonna say is I'm hearing based on the past that whatever is gonna happen is gonna start first quarter 2017 after the election.
It's gonna start then?
Right, because if you go back and look at the trends, all of the downfalls that we've had, the big ones happen after the election. So after the election, look for some things that happen in first quarter 2017, and that's just somebody's guess that's intel that I got from somewhere else. But either way, they can't continue to kick the can down the road forever. There is a dead end. And I liken it unto playing musical chairs. And I don't know if you used to do that when you were a kid, Kat.
Yeah.
But I was the master of musical chairs because I didn't la-di-da-di-da around the chairs while the music was going on. I strategically stood in front of a chair until I had to go to the next one. And then I literally leapt in front of the chair. So I was never really between the chairs. So when the music went off, I was always in front of a chair.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of people just lolly-dallying around and don't realize that when the music stops, they're not going to have a chair.
Yeah.
So the question is, who is paying attention and who's going to have a chair and who's going to be flat on their butt on the ground? And unfortunately, Kat, at that point, we have to figure out who we can trust because, again, what are the people going to do that did not prepare? They're going to go. I don't know if you've heard of Catherine Austin Fitz that used to work in. I was in an offshore conference with Catherine and some other people, and there was a guy that was talking about, I'm going to be safe because I have a maybe 3 or 4 acres, and I'm not really in the city. I'm kind of out in the way out in the rural area, and I have this and I have that. And she looked him dead in the eye. And she said, "If your neighbors are hungry, you won't be safe." Mm-hmm. And that woke him up. Because there's this series on Netflix. It's called Revolution, and it starts 15 years after the power went out, that somebody took out the power grid. Well, that's an interesting series to watch because somebody's thinking ahead about what's going to happen. 2/3 of the people were dead because there was no power. There were neighbors robbing neighbors having to kill their neighbor because the neighbor didn't have anything and the other neighbor did. This is the kind of thing that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to think about.
Right.
But just because you don't talk about it and just because you don't think about it doesn't mean that it's not on the way.
And it's especially if you don't think about it or talking about it, you're actually bringing it on even more. Because the more you talk about it and acknowledge the reality of it, the more you can, at least hopefully lessen that somewhat. But
right. And you know what? I wanted to mention the websites for the books because if people really want to start preparing for their futures and making sure that their families are taken care of, the How to Escape the Rat Race book is at escapetheratrace.com. And the How to Stick It to the IRS book is at stickittotheirs.com with no how-to in front of it. Just stickittotheirs.com. How to Escape the Rat Race is escapetheratrace.com. If they really want to know, if people haven't been preparing and they want to start preparing, there's several different things that they can do, step by step. Some of them at the same time, some of them they have to start a little bit later. But if they want to know what to do, they need to get the book. I'm having workshops all over the country. I'll be in Tampa, Florida, on the 21st, which is next Sunday. After that, I have 2 workshops in Atlanta, the 27th of February and March 12th. And then I'll be in Chino Hills, California, right outside of LA on April 2nd and April 8th. And they can get that information at spjevents.com. That's my initials, Sherry Peel Jackson. S is in Sherry, P is in Peel, J is in Jackson, events.com. Because I am out there with the clarion call, telling people this is what you need to do. That's my job right now. I've already talked to people that, are saying that I don't know what to do. Well, I'm telling you, this is what you need to do. So if people are interested in learning how to escape the rat race, how to stick to the IRS, and how to protect their families, then they should get the book and they should come to the workshops. They're 8-hour workshops. And my tax attorney, Mac McPherson, is going to be at the 2 in Chino Hills, California.
Is there any scheduling for you to come to New York City?
Queens, New York, either end of June or mid-July.
And where's that going to be?
Don't know yet, but I have it on my calendar because people are wanting me to come to New York. But it'll be the end of June or mid-July, not during the 4th, but maybe a week or 2 after the 4th of July.
Yeah, I definitely want to go to that.
Yeah. Dallas is on their schedule, but again, I need people to help me find a nice place like DoubleTrees. I like those. And really, for people to help me, the biggest help that people can be to me is to fill the room. Help me fill the room.
Yeah.
Get once I get the flyers out about where it's going to be, just to help me fill the rooms. I know you will. I definitely know you will. I'll be ready.
Oh, do you know the venue yet for Queens?
Nope. I'm looking at somewhere near Queens in that area. So as soon as I know, you'll know.
Okay, great.
All right.
So Sherry Peel Jackson, How to Stick It to the IRS, and it's stickittotheirs.com.
Right.
And check out America Freedom to Fascism. That's always a really good documentary. It never ever gets old. And I just want to encourage people to join forces with, your neighbors and the people around you and start resisting the powers that be and not the other way around. Stop working for the powers that be at the expense of the people around you, because exactly right. When the shit hits the fan, it's going to be those relationships around you that you haven't been maintaining the whole time are going to be the ones that turn on you.
That's right. Turn off the TV, turn off the electronic income reducer, and start doing research on the internet. Start reading books. Start learning what you can do to help yourself and your family.
Get lean and a little bit mean. So thank you so much, Sherry Peel Jackson.
Thank you for having me on the show again. It's wonderful.
Yeah, you're welcome. And my pleasure.
You have a blessed evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Good night.